There are places in the world that seem to exist just beneath the surface of the news. You know the ones. They are the cities and the corners of the map that don't constantly wave their hands for attention. They don't dominate the headlines on the morning television, and they don't seem to be in a rush to reinvent themselves every few years. I have been thinking about this lately, just watching the way the light changes in the afternoon here. There is a certain comfort in realize that some systems endure simply by not overreacting. They survive because they have learned, through long experience, that most urgent things are not actually that urgent, and that the ground beneath our feet is more important than the weather passing overhead. When you spend enough time in Madrid, really living here, not just passing through, you begin to feel a distinct rhythm. It isn't the frenetic pace you find in other capitals where the markets seem to vibrate with every piece of gossip. Here, the feeling is heavier. It is more grounded. You walk past these grand stone buildings in the center of the city, and they don't look like they were built to house fleeting ideas. They look like they were built to hold things down. I suppose that is what stability really looks like when you stare at it long enough. It isn't a slogan. It certainly isn't something you can manufacture overnight with a marketing campaign. Stability is closer to a habit. It is the result of doing the same quiet, sensible things over and over again, regardless of what the rest of the world is shouting about. It makes you think about how money moves here and how the financial world here has constructed itself. It feels very much like the architecture. It prefers weight over height. There is a sense that the people who have managed these ledgers for generations are not particularly interested in being the first to try something new. They are interested in being the last one standing. And there is a profound difference between those two ambitions. When you watch the way business is conducted, say in a quiet cafe or just observing the flow of people coming in and out of those heavy revolving doors, you don't see panic. You rarely see that frantic look of someone who is afraid the floor is about to drop out. Instead, there's a kind of steady, almost stubborn adherence to the known path. I've often thought that steadiness is an undervalued currency. We live in a time that prizes disruption, that loves the story of the sudden rise. But the sudden rise is usually followed by the sudden fall. Here, the preference is for the plateau. A steady environment avoids extremes. It creates a space where you can predict, with a reasonable amount of certainty, what next year will look like. And for those of us who have seen enough years go by, that predictability becomes something precious. It becomes much more valuable than the promise of a quick fortune. You see, a system that prioritizes continuity over ambition is a system that protects people. It protects the quiet savings. It protects the plans that take 20 years to come to fruition, not 20 minutes. And Madrid seems to understand this in its bones. It is a city that rests on a high plateau, physically and metaphorically. It doesn't flood easily. It doesn't shake easily. There is a patience here that I find reassuring. You can hear it in the way people speak about the future. They don't speak about it as if it's a lottery ticket. They speak about it as if it's a house they are slowly building, brick by brick. And the financial life of this place mirrors that. It moves carefully. It checks the foundation before it adds another story. Some might call that conservative, or even slow. But slow is just another word for careful. And when you are dealing with the livelihoods of millions of people, careful is exactly what you want. You want the hands on the wheel to be steady. You want the eyes looking forward to be calm, not wide with excitement. It's interesting to observe how this impacts the daily mood. Because the financial bedrock is stable, the anxiety level on the street feels different. It is lower. There isn't that electric hum of stress that you feel in cities where everyone is leveraged to the hilt, gambling on the next big turn. Here, the roots go deep. There is a sense of preservation. That is a word I come back to often. Preservation. The idea is not to conquer new territory, but to keep the garden we have already planted healthy, to make sure the walls hold, to make sure the roof doesn't leak. These are simple domestic metaphors, I know. But they apply to the largest banks and the most complex funds just as much as they apply to a household. The institutions here have a long memory. They remember the lean years. They remember the difficult times of the past century. And that memory serves as a ballast. It keeps the ship from tipping over when the winds pick up. They don't chase the phantom of easy money because they know, from history, that easy money usually evaporates. So, they stick to the fundamentals. They lend to people who can pay back. They invest in things that you can touch and see. They value relationships that have lasted for decades over transactions that happen in a millisecond. It is a human scale of finance, even when the numbers are large. It feels personal. And because it feels personal, there is a layer of trust that accumulates over time like sediment. You trust a system not because it is perfect, but because it is familiar. You know how it behaves. You know, it isn't going to wake up one morning and decide to be something completely different. I find myself walking through the older neighborhoods in the evenings, watching the lights come on in the apartments. It's a peaceful time. And I think about how that peace is supported by this invisible infrastructure of stability. The reason people can sit in the plazas and talk for hours, the reason they can enjoy their dinners late into the night without looking at their phones every 5 minutes to check the markets, is because they are not worried that the system is going to collapse. They have outsourced that worry to the institutions that were built to carry it. And those institutions carry it quietly. They don't brag about it. You don't see billboards announcing, "We are very stable." It is just understood. It is part of the atmosphere, like the dry air or the clear blue sky in winter. It is a specific kind of resilience. Not the resilience of a rubber band that snaps back, but the resilience of a stone wall. It just sits there. It weathers the rain. It weathers the sun. And when you come back 10 years later, it is still there, perhaps a little more weathered, but just as strong. This approach influences everything. It influences how businesses grow. They tend to grow organically rather than by inflating themselves. It influences how families plan for their grandchildren. There is a lineage of thought, a passing down of prudent habits. I have noticed that in the conversations I overhear, people talk about preserving capital, not doubling it. They talk about safety. They talk about what is real. There is a skepticism toward the abstract, toward the things that only exist on a computer screen. If you can't explain it simply, it probably doesn't belong here. That simplicity is a strength. Complexity is often where the danger hides. By keeping things relatively straightforward, by sticking to the traditional ways of moving resources from where they are to where they are needed, the system avoids the traps that catch the more adventurous places. It is a quiet confidence. It doesn't need to shout. It knows that time is the ultimate test. And so far, time has been kind to this method. The years roll on, and the city remains. The businesses remain, the savings remain. There is a lack of drama that is truly wonderful. We spend so much of our lives entertained by drama in books or movies, but in our financial reality, drama is the last thing we want. We want boredom. We want routine. We want to open the statement at the end of the month and see exactly what we expected to see. This city excels at that kind of boredom. It turns the mundane into a virtue. It elevates the routine to an art form. The daily opening of the shutters, the daily counting of the till, the daily signing of the contracts. It is a ritual, and rituals are what hold societies together. I think about the people working in those offices. Many of them have been there for 20, 30 years. They are not jumping from job to job. They are the keepers of the institutional knowledge. They know why a decision was made in 1995 and why that decision still matters today. That kind of continuity is rare now. In many places, the turnover is so high that no one remembers what happened 5 years ago, let alone 20. But here, the memory is living. It sits in the chair across from you. And because they remember, they don't make the same mistakes. They might make new ones, of course. No system is flawless, but they don't repeat the old follies. They have a map of the rough waters, and they steer around them. It creates a sensation of weight. The economy here feels heavy, in a good way. It feels anchored. It isn't a balloon waiting to be popped. It is a structure resting on the earth. I watch the seasons change here. The heat of the summer gives way to the crispness of autumn, and eventually the cold, sharp winter. And through it all, the commerce continues. The banks open their doors at the same time. The transactions are processed with the same deliberation. There is a comfort in that cycle. It reminds you that we are part of a long chain of events. We are not the first people to worry about the future, and we won't be the last. But we are lucky to be in a place that takes that worry seriously, that treats security as the highest goal. It is interesting how, when you are younger, you might find this frustrating. You might want things to move faster. You might want more risk, more action. But as you get older, your perspective shifts. You begin to see the beauty in the slow lane. You begin to understand that the tortoise usually does beat the hare simply because the tortoise keeps moving while the hare is distracted. Madrid is the tortoise. It just keeps moving, one foot in front of the other, unbothered by the noise, unimpressed by the flash. And this attitude permeates the culture. It isn't just in the banks. It's in the way a shopkeeper wraps a package. It's in the way a waiter pours the wine. There's a deliberate care, a refusal to rush. Because if you rush, you might drop something. And if you drop it, it breaks. And they don't like breaking things here. They like fixing them, keeping them, handing them down. The financial stability is just a reflection of that deeper cultural value, the value of holding on, the value of endurance. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, the city gets very quiet. The traffic seems to lull, and in that silence, you can almost feel the machinery of the place humming along. It's a low hum, efficient, calm. It's the sound of a system that is working exactly as it was designed to work. Not to make headlines, but to make life possible. It allows us to focus on other things. Because we don't have to constantly monitor the foundations, we can look at the view. We can enjoy the company of friends. We can read a book. We can sleep soundly. That ability to sleep soundly, that is perhaps the greatest dividend of all. It is the return on investment that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet, but shows up in the faces of the people. I look at the older generation here, the ones walking arm in arm on a Sunday. They look content. They don't look like they are bracing for impact. They look like they trust the ground they are walking on, and they have every reason to. It's a system built by people who have seen it all. They have seen empires rise and fall. They have seen currencies change. They have seen borders shift. And through it all, they learned that the only thing that really matters is staying true to the basics. Don't spend what you don't have. Don't promise what you can't deliver. And don't gamble with the rent money. Simple rules, ancient rules, really. But they are the reason this place feels so solid. And as the world gets faster and louder and more unpredictable, I think places like this will become even more important. They will be the anchors, the sanctuaries of sanity, the places where you can go to remember what stability feels like. It's not exciting, I grant you that. It won't make your heart race, but it will keep your heart beating at a nice, steady rhythm. And there's a lot to be said for that. The sun is starting to dip now, casting those long shadows across the avenues. The light is turning that warm gold color that only seems to exist here. And the city is just continuing. The buses are running. The lights are flickering on in the office towers. The work is being done. There is no finish line. That's another thing you realize. There is no point where they say, okay, we made it. We are stable now. It is a constant process. It is a daily practice. Like tending a garden, you have to water it every day. You have to pull the weeds. You have to check the soil. And they do. Day after day, year after year. Without fanfare, they just keep tending the garden, ensuring that the roots are strong, ensuring that the growth is sustainable. It is a quiet dedication, a silent pact between the past and the future. And as you sit here and watch it, you realize that you are watching something very strong, something that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. It just is. It flows like the water in the fountains, recirculating, moving, but always staying within the basin, always contained, always controlled. There's a peace in knowing that tomorrow will look very much like today, that the surprises will be small, that the shocks will be absorbed. It allows you to breathe a little deeper, to drop your shoulders, to settle into the chair. The stability isn't a wall that separates us from the world. It is the floor that holds us up. And it is a very good floor. Solid timber, stone, built by hands that knew what they were doing. So the city moves into the evening. The hum continues. The ledger is balanced for the day, and the books are closed, only to be opened again in the morning, with the same calm precision, the same careful attention. And that rhythm, that slow, steady heartbeat, it just goes on.